Morning! Fam bam! What's poppin'? Good morning! Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. Today we are talking about the three BMWs that I've owned and what the reliability was like on each of those and kind of like the things to look out for, just like my experience overall on owning those three BMWs. I'm of course being respectful, it's still early. What is it, 8:30 in the morning, so the valves are closed. I'm gonna grab some coffee here and I'm pretty much guaranteeing that after I get coffee in me, you know what happens to those valves. Oil's heating up, doing its job. I love this steering wheel. This thing's awesome, man. Such a beautiful addition to this interior. Good morning. May I have a grande nitro cold brew with sweet cream?
Absolutely. What else can I get for you?
That'll be it.
Alrighty, it's gonna be $5.36 out the window.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
It's my favorite. Coffee acquired. There's a 99% chance that I'll scrape coming out of this driveway. Happens every time. Ready for it? The guy's looking at me in the car like, what is he doing? I just listen to my car scrape, bro. No worries. Yeah, the splitter's aggressive, man. It sticks out pretty far. And it's definitely pretty low. You know, I've probably scraped it, I don't know, a dozen times already, but it's like, honestly, I accepted the fact that this thing would scrape when I bought it, so I kind of knew that sometimes it scrapes. Just gotta deal with it. A little scraping never hurt anyone. Now it's probably as good of a time as any. And good morning, Charlotte. Sheesh. God damn. Today we're gonna be talking about the reliability of the three cars that I've owned. So which ones were like the most reliable and kind of my experience with owning the three different cars. First, let's talk about the three different cars that I have in fact owned. If you are a newer subscriber, maybe you do not know, but I started this channel with an F30, hence the name Thick F30. I had a 328i, it was a 2013 early model. And then after that, I had an E90 M3 that was a 2010, so it was the LCI E90 M3. And then obviously now I have the F87 M2, this is a 2017. So rewinding back to the 328i, was a fantastic car to own. And it was honestly just a great daily driver. I had barely any issues with that car. In the entire 5 years of owning that car, I only had one kind of odd thing fail, and it was the emergency e-brake internals. They just rusted out because the car was actually from the north. It was from Wisconsin, and I had lived there, and the car was parked outside for numerous winters. And honestly, when I first bought the car, I didn't take care of it as well as I should have. But when I did first buy that car, I was coming from a Honda Civic Si, and this was my first time buying a BMW and kind of getting involved in a more luxury line vehicle. So it was a learning process, but I absolutely loved the car, and it honestly felt like I was getting into a Lamborghini. Like coming from a Honda, it just felt like it was like the most beautiful, most luxurious car that you could buy at that age. I bought the car with 24,000 miles on it, and I paid right around $24,000 actually. It was just a baseline 328i. It was actually a sport line, so it had like the black trim and everything. It really was like the perfect BMW starter car for me because I didn't know anything about BMWs. I'd always been interested in the E30s when I was like in my early teens. I wanted an E30 like 325, but I just ended up not getting one because it wasn't a good starter, reliable car for a teenager. So I ended up getting this 328i and I drove it for 5 years. I owned that car for 5 years, which for me is a really long time. That is definitely the longest that I've ever owned any car. And the funny thing about it is I've owned a lot of cars. I've had like 10 or 12 cars in my lifetime, mostly Hondas in my early days. And I did have like a GMC Jimmy when I was like, I don't know, like 18 or 19 years old. But the funny thing is there's that stereotype that BMWs just in general are super unreliable, and that 328 was the most reliable car that I ever owned. Even out of all of the Hondas that I had, all the Acuras that I had, the GMC Jimmy that I had, the 328i was hands down the most reliable car that I owned. At the same time, it was also the most expensive car that I had owned at that time. So the kind of weird fluke thing that happened was the emergency e-brake internals failed. They kind of just like exploded apart within the brake. I was literally driving like 30 miles an hour on the road and the car just came to a screeching halt. This was shortly after I had moved to North Carolina. Ended up finding out that the internals were just completely rusted through, which honestly had to do with the car just sitting outside in Wisconsin winters, which I do not recommend. I never buy cars from the north anymore just because winters are so tough on cars. The really cold temperatures and the salt on the roads, the snow, just all of that just does a number on your car. So if you do live in the north, my condolences. Make sure you garage your car. But now I'm in the south, so I don't really have to worry about it too much. So like I was saying, that was a great first starter car, super reliable. I never really had any issues with it. I'm leaving out most of the maintenance things like spark plugs and oil changes because I think that that goes without saying. Like, yes, you have to maintain your car. This is more about reliability and things that happened or things that went wrong while I owned these cars. So the F30 had it for 5 years. Dude, absolutely love that car. Like, it is the brick, the building brick and the staple of this channel. And that car and that chassis taught me so much about BMWs and just the community and me getting involved with YouTube. Like, I will never forget my 328i. That will be the car that I always remember no matter what I end up buying down the line. And so after I had the 328i for a while and did everything that I wanted to do to it, kind of built up the channel, the obvious next step was to go to something a little more powerful, and that was kind of what I was yearning for. I had so much fun building and learning about the 328i, but I wanted to experience an M car. Everyone talks about owning an M car, and I really wanted to have that experience. I wanted to get into actually owning an M car and having a little more power and a better suspension and better handling. And so I actually went back a few years and bought an E90 M3. So the E90 M3, my older brother actually owned one when I was younger, and the E90 M3 was always just such a sexy car to me. I just loved that car. I still love the E90, E92s. I think that they're one of the most beautiful BMWs that you can buy, and there's just something to be said about having a V8 in this BMW that is so raw. Like, this is before everything is super electronic, and it's just such a raw feeling car. You don't get that kind of feeling in these BMWs anymore. They're very electronic nowadays, and it kind of strips away some of that experience when you're driving those cars. So I really wasn't on like the hunt for one, but I came across one out of chance locally that was just in really good condition. And I knew that these cars were highly sought after in good condition because a lot of them had higher mileage. A lot of them were starting to end up total. They're abused, just not in the greatest condition. This thing was flawless. So I ended up pulling the trigger on this one that was not even 4 miles from my house. And honestly, one of the coolest cars I've ever owned in my life. So you're probably asking, like, why don't I have that anymore? The reason I sold the E90 M3 is it wasn't really the spec that I wanted. It was a good learning spec to like learn about these cars, the E90 M3s and the V8s, but it wasn't ideally the spec that I would keep long term. After owning the E90 M3 for a while, I kind of realized that I'm more of an E92 person. I loved the sedan, but with the V8, I wanted that coupe, man. I wanted that sport coupe. I just thought they looked better too, like overall. In the beginning of all this, I really thought that I was a sedan guy for life. Really started to realize I'm more of a coupe guy. It's just more my thing. I think it's more sporty, and I never use the back seats, like ever. Like these back seats in this M2 they're gonna be gone. I'm taking them out. I'm gonna get a rear seat, delete, and a cage. Forget about it. We don't need them. So after having the E90 M3 for a while, I was like, you know what? I love the DCT in this car. I love this car, but for me personally, I am more of a two-door coupe, E92 manual person. I still had an absolute blast owning that E90, and it taught me so much about the E series. But when it came down to reliability, that car actually wasn't that bad. A lot of people say that the S65 is just a super unreliable engine. I think it's a luck of the draw, man. Like, it depends on how it was taken care of before you pick up the car. I really didn't know how the car was maintained before I bought it. I could have just gone with that gamble and not done the rod bearings, but at the same time, I really did want to just take care of it so I didn't have to worry about anything. And I also wanted to make the content for you guys, changing out all the rod bearings and kind of giving you my experience on that. And I definitely think if you are going to buy an S65 powered BMW, definitely do the rod bearings. If it hasn't been done before, just do it, take care of it. It's that peace of mind and you never have to worry about it again, and the car just drives 10 times better. You really don't know if the owners previous to you allowed the car to warm up enough, and you really just don't know if that car was abused or not. So I just went ahead and did it, never had to worry about it again. I also had sort of like a funky issue with the FRM in that car. The FRM was corrupt in my E90 M3. I ended up having it replaced, but I had to pay out of pocket. It was a warranty item, but BMW wouldn't warranty it because it wasn't prohibiting the car from driving or throwing up any errors. But I did know that the FRM was in fact corrupt because when I tried to code things, it wouldn't allow me to code. And then once I actually paid $500 out of pocket to fix the FRM, I was able to code whatever I wanted. So I was right, it was a corrupt FRM, but BMW of course did not want to cover that for me. Thank you, BMW. I appreciate it. So that was really the only issue that I had with the E90 M3, which was kind of just also a freak thing. Like, it happened to certain models with the S65. Some of them had this issue, some of them didn't. Some people got lucky, some people didn't. It's almost like the timing chain thing with the F30. Like, I never fixed my timing chain on my F30, and when I sold it, it had 75,000 miles, and the car was fine. Technically, it fell within those dates of needing a new timing chain guide to remedy that issue or take care of that issue to make sure that it would never happen, but I just never did it. I also babied that car. Like, I really didn't beat the crap out of my F30. I knew that I didn't have an M car and I wasn't gonna drive my 328i like it was an M car. Fast forward to January of 2020 this year, I decided that I was going to actually go buy an M4. So I went and test drove an M4. It just didn't resonate with me. Like, I didn't love the car and I didn't love the way that it looked and I didn't love the way that it drove. Also, the specific one that they had was just not, it wasn't in the best of conditions. And they just happened to have had a 2017 manual pre-LCI M2. I had never really considered an M2. I did, however, do a feature film on my friend Matt M2 Ghost. I had done a feature film on his car a few weeks prior to me going to the dealership, and the gears started changing with my thoughts on the M2. After I made that video on his car, I realized that I had been kind of sleeping on the M2 for a while now, and I didn't realize how sick these cars actually are, especially with the manual transmission. Like, I know that's a big debate, DCT or manual. I think for experience, like if you're just looking for a fun car that's quick and you want an experience out of it, the most experience out of that car, you go with the manual. Especially now that in the future we may not have the option of buying these cars in manual. I'm sure at some point BMW will get rid of the option of going with the manual. It's almost like these cars are becoming extinct. Kind of is the way that I see it. And I just love the feeling of having the clutch and having the shifter and throwing around gears. It's just, there's no feeling like that. DCT does not do it for you. DCT is still super fun, don't get me wrong, and it's fast as heck. If you're going for speed, get a DCT. But when it comes to experience, I'm a manual guy through and through. So went to the dealership to buy this M4, wasn't really feeling it, wasn't really vibing with it. Saw this M2 and I was like, nah, why not? Like, let's go for a test drive in this M2. It was really, really clean, only had 30,000 miles. So we go for a drive and we get like 3 blocks into the driving with this car. I was like, write up the papers, dude. Let's do this. This car, this is it. This is the car. And I was totally not expecting to buy an M2. Now, fast forward to now. I mean, it didn't take this long for me to figure this out, but fast forward to now, this is hands down my favorite car that I've ever owned. To date, out of all the BMWs, all of the Acuras and Hondas, this F87 M2 in manual is by far my favorite car that I have owned to date. Everything from the way that it handles, everything from the way that it sounds, the way it puts down the power, the way that it looks, all of the styling and modification options that I have for this car, bar none, this is my favorite car that I've ever owned. And I think if you've been watching these videos for a while, you probably are picking up on that. So I only had that E90 M3 for 5 or 6 months just because I didn't really love it. It was a fun experience to have that car and kind of build it up and do all the maintenance stuff to it, but it just never really resonated with me like this car does, or the F30. Like, I love the F30 too, but I really had no issue getting rid of the E90. It was kind of easy for me to let that go because honestly, it just wasn't that special to me. This car, however, is super special to me. I don't think I will ever get rid of this. If I have the capabilities and the space to keep this car forever, I will, because it's just, there's nothing like it. The driving experience of this car, and I'm not talking about all the M2s in general, I'm just talking about this specific one because of the way that I have modified it and what I have done to it, the way that it handles, and the way that I put like my spin on it. It just feels perfect, man. It just feels so good. And now that we're getting into some custom tuning, building up a little more power, I'm just so excited to dial this thing into like the perfect daily driving and trackable, reliable car. But in terms of reliability, I mean, it's a 17, it's only got 35,000 miles, so you can probably guess I've had zero issues with it. Like all of the other models that I've had, obviously oil changes, brakes, spark plugs, you know, these are all things that you need to take care of without question. This does have an N55 in it, so there are some talks about the N55 having some rod bearing issues or just wear, overall wear. Now, like anything else, it's super important to make sure that your oil heats up, and that's honestly why I got the steering wheel, because it has the oil temp gauge. Super important to let that oil get to operating temperature before you start ripping around on your car. I think if I have this car up to like the 100,000 mile mark, maybe we might do the rod bearings, maybe, depending on how much I'm tracking it and how much I'm beating on it. These N55Bs are fantastic motors, man, and if you take care of them, they'll take care of you. I also want to say that the S55 and the M2 competition and the M4 and M3 is a sick engine. And if you are looking for power, like you just want all the power, go with the S55. That's gonna put you where you wanna be, because downpipes in a tune, like you can reach crazy numbers. This N55 is gonna take a little more modification to get to the higher numbers. My goal personally with this car is really just 500 horsepower, daily driven, and reliability. I'm not really looking to push this thing into crazy horsepower numbers. I just don't think it's necessary with this car. If I did want to go that route, I would probably do something like an S55 M2 comp, or even looking into like the E90 SUPRA or a 340 with the B58, because those engines are a little more tailored to putting out gigantic horsepower numbers and just taking it. So I guess you could probably say that this video is for all of those people out there that talk crap about how unreliable BMWs are. Dude, it all depends on the owner. It all depends on how you're taking care of the car and doing your research and finding out, you know, what is the history on the car, and just making sure that you buy the correct models that aren't just prone to having a lot of failures and malfunctions and issues down the line. I kind of knew getting into the 328i that I wasn't gonna have too many issues as long as I wasn't really like beating the crap out of the car and I just maintained it and took care of it. I knew with the E90 M3, I already knew that I was gonna be taking care of the rod bearings. I made sure that it didn't have any oil leaks. The valve cover gaskets on the S65s tend to leak a lot. The valve covers also bubble up a little bit, so a lot of people are replacing the gaskets and the valve covers in general on the S65. I knew all of that getting into it. I just knew that it was gonna be a more expensive car and would probably, especially getting into the higher mileage, take a little more money to maintain. It was good that I had owned that car, because the E90, that specific one, the E90 M3, just wasn't for me. In the future, if I did go back into that platform, which I think I might, I would do an E92 Interlagos carbon slick top roof with manual. Hands down, that is the way that I would go. Or I would do the Alpine White with the manual carbon roof. I think those are the two sexiest ones out there. But for right now, we've got my beautiful M2 here, and I'm just in love with this car, and I'm having so much fun building it. Anyways, guys, if you have owned a few BMWs in your life, please comment down below. I want to light this comment section up. I want to turn this into like a forum section, help people who are looking to buy BMWs. I mean, one of the most common DMs that I get is, I'm looking to buy a BMW. I'm looking to buy this BMW. Should I do it? Is it reliable? The most common DMs that I get are about that. So if you guys want to comment down below, talk about what you own, has it been reliable, what kind of issues have you come across? Maybe we can help some of these people out who are looking to buy BMWs. But you guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Please do subscribe. Please, if you enjoy this content, make sure you subscribe. We're trying to get to 50,000, we're almost there. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please like this video, comment down below, hit that bell notification, and just like that, this video's over, and we are out. Peace.